Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Brownell Landrum. She is an author, songwriter, host, and producer of the Life is a Trip podcast. She's also an explorer of metaphysical mysteries, and in this episode, we'll discuss how her work is inspired by past lives and reincarnation. Brownell, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks. Glad to be here.
Life is a Trip podcast. We're going to have to dive into that, and I'm sure there's a lot to unpack. Very, very cool stuff. What got you interested in exploring and writing about the metaphysical in the first place?
I got interested in it in the 80s, like a lot of people with Shirley MacLaine when she came out with Out on a Limb. But it wasn't until 2006 when I wrote my first book, which was nonfiction, and it was called 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen. So when people say everything happens for a reason, I literally wrote the book on it. So there's a big debate. Does it happen for a reason? Yes. And I can tell you why. And then it wasn't until a few years later that I started writing fiction and had so much fun. I wrote a love story, and then I had so much fun writing the sequel to go back to their previous lifetimes and pulling all that together. I always tell people, I don't care if you believe in reincarnation or not. I just want to open minds. And it's kind of like, you don't have to believe in time travel to like Back to the Future, but it's so much fun to write, especially a relationship story. You can reintroduce the couples in a previous world, in a previous situation all over again. And it's super fun. And the new books, I'm sure you'll ask about, but the new series that I just launched the pre-order on is a famous couple from history who's reincarnated today to fulfill a prophecy that'll change the world. So that has 5 lifetimes in it. And that was really fun to write too.
That's interesting because there's 3 episodes with a woman I interviewed previously that has a similar story about a couple that have reincarnated over several lifetimes that are actually alive today. For the inspiration part, do you have past life memories of your own?
I do. A few. I have kind of an interesting soul history as far as I don't think I'm originally from this planet. So that kind of explains. So I think that some of my memories are certainly from past lives, but some might be what I call kind of implanted memories. I think when people come from another planet here, they can go through kind of a simulation of what a lifetime would be like, but it might not be exactly the same as having lived that life. So I'm getting into weird territory here, but I think you like the weird. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. Good point. We do like a lot of the unexplained. The bandwidth of vision and sound, we can only see and hear a very small section of what actually is out there. If you've ever had a pet staring at something which you can't see, that illustrates the point because they can see things and hear things that we can't.
That's very true. The novels that I'm talking about are definitely fiction. I mean, they're pure fiction. There's another story that I wrote that's called The End that we talked about before, which is definitely my most autobiographical story that I've ever written. And it's all been conjuring from this last year, which a year ago, my landlord in Aspen decided to raise the rent 50%. And so that set me on an adventure. Sometimes the universe has to knock you. Sometimes it's like border collies. You're going this way and no, we want you over here. That led me to write that story. And it's from the point of view of what I call the upstairs. So I call them traffic angels. It's like if this person's here and this person's here, how do you get them together? If you take an American woman in Aspen and a British man, how do you get them to meet in Tunisia, which is a true story. But it's written from the point of view of this team upstairs and their guides and kind of these angels, these kind of logistics angels. What was so fun about it, Johnny, is that I was writing it and all of a sudden I'm realizing this is true. This is real. These beings are real and they are telling me their story. So it was just a blast to write.
I think that's what I was getting at before, because you've had a very interesting soul history, and I'm not sure how many past lives you remember. I remember many speakers telling me I've had hundreds, if not thousands. The point is you've lived it, you've remembered it, so even though what you're writing is fiction, it's still somewhat based on fact. Does that make sense?
Totally. And the novels that I've got coming out now are written about this famous couple in history, and I don't know if I was one of them, but I certainly know they have been telling me what to write, and they have been kind of cheering me on what story they want to tell. You mentioned the group and the podcast that I have, Life is a Trip, Reincarnation Stories. It's really important that we couch it in whether it's fictional or factual, because when it's couched in fiction, sometimes people can suspend their disbelief and just enjoy the story, and that can open up people's minds even more. So it's really fun to kind of put that angle on it, because then we're not trying to prove anything to anybody. We're just trying to tell you a story. And sometimes I found people that read my book and stories, they might be Muslim or might be very evangelical Christian and not think that they've ever could possibly believe in reincarnation, or atheist, but they love the stories. And all of a sudden now their mind is open to something that they wouldn't have been open to before.
Great point. I've had people tell me that some of the Star Wars movies were completely channeled, right? Which I think is what you touched on earlier. And with the books, I'm talking to more people that have written books, even though it's fiction, it's inspired by some of their own past life memories. Shows on TV like Netflix and so on that are kind of touching on time travel and the past lives, right? We're seeing that more and more these days.
More and more, and I think we're just starting to see a lot more. I think that this is an avenue from just a pure storytelling standpoint. It's just fun. It's just interesting and fun and creative. From a marketing standpoint, there's 1.5 billion people on this planet that believe in reincarnation, and there are not enough stories out there. I even pitched a TV series to Hollywood, and I outlined over 500 possible episodes of that show with past life stories. So many ways to tell these stories, so many kinds of stories, which is why I started the podcast, because we're celebrating writers around the world who are telling these stories and letting people just go and listen to stories. And they're so different. Some are funny, some are very serious, some are mystical. And just the more stories we get out there, the more I think we're going to change the world. I kind of believe that.
I agree. I was just about to ask you about that, but before we do that, 5 reasons bad things happen. Can't wait to hear this. So what are they?
So you want the whole spoiler?
I guess so. We have to do it at some point, right?
That's totally fine. I want to couch it just to begin with is that I have a list of what I call the basic assumptions. So if the basic assumptions don't resonate with somebody, then there's not much I can do. But if they do, then everything bad that happens, I can explain it with one of these 5 reasons. Some of the basic assumptions are that there is some sort of higher power. You don't have to believe it's God or any definition of that. It could be an energy like love. It could be infinite intelligence. It could be a creator, kind of like Einstein believed in. But you have to believe that there's some intelligence to the plan. You have to kind of believe that there's a soul, and the soul chooses the body. It becomes you, because that's a big part of what I'm getting ready to explain on the 5 reasons. So there are things like the good versus evil. Evil happens when we're separated from that divine part of ourselves. So when people talk about the shadow self, it's really just separating yourself from the divine part. A lot of people say, oh, it's balanced. No, not in my book, literally in my book. When you're separating yourself, and then you live in this planet that is based on survival of the fittest, and you get kind of into that mucky world of survival of the fittest, like, oh, I have to be stronger than you or smarter than you.
The 3D world.
Yeah. And so all of this is pretty logical stuff for most of us. Some people might go, oh, I don't believe that, and I'm going to have a hard time convincing them. But the first one is, as I said, you have a soul that chooses a body and becomes you. That soul is your higher self, or you could call it your super ego or your superconscious, right? Basic psychology 101. And the mind is the combination of the two, right? It's when you become you. If my soul had chosen your body, it would be very different, or vice versa. And then the body is the subconscious. And when I realized that the body is the subconscious, that's what opened everything up in terms of explaining it. So the first reason why bad things happen is subconscious sabotage. And it's so simply explained when you realize it's your body telling you it doesn't want to do something you want it to do. And so you have to get really in touch with that part of yourself, that body self, the subconscious. For example, one of the stories I like to tell is that a friend of mine was a workaholic. She was going to work all Labor Day weekend, one weekend, and she goes out to get Thai food, comes back, trips on the curb, and she's in bed all weekend with a swollen ankle. Her body was like, hell no, I'm not working all weekend. I don't care what you tell me, right? So the body will come in and sabotage you in a lot of ways that you're just not aware of unless you're really in touch with your body. I'm sure you've been driving down a street or on a highway or whatever, and then you kind of forget, there's a gap of time that you forget. Your mind goes away, but your body takes over. But your body can take over and do kind of not good things, like eat things that you shouldn't eat, all these kinds of things. So on the body level, first of all, just try to understand the connection. I'm not sure how much you know about the Huna religion. Are you very familiar with that?
I'm not an authority on any religion.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I learned it from a friend of mine, and I just took this principle from there, which is, you've heard of the Big Kahuna, right? Well, the Big Kahuna is the head of the Huna tribe. It's a Polynesian religion. And it's more like Psychology 101 to me. But one of the principles that I loved about it was to come up with a name for your body. And I'm telling you, if the world could just come up with a name for their body and get to know their body and have conversations with their body, then that would change everything. Because you could go, hey, body, what do you want to do today? What do you want to eat? And you can also negotiate with your body saying, look, if you focus for the next hour to get this project done, I'll take you out to have fun. If not, the body will sabotage you all afternoon and you don't get to do either thing.
When our soul picks a body, which sounds a lot like what happens in the in-between incarnation space, right?
Yes,
Life between lives,
exactly.
where you choose a family, I think. Then you come down here, obviously you drink from the river of forgetfulness.
The Lethe from Dante.
And then you come down here and you realize that there's good parts and there's bad parts. But what you don't remember is that you signed up for it back then in that space. Could that explain a lot of it?
Yeah. In fact, I wrote a children's book that's kind of about the meaning of life. And there's a verse in there that says, we decide on our lessons, the paths we will take, awards we might go for, and mistakes we might make. For life isn't easy and not always fun, but easy is boring, like games always won.
That's great.
Yeah, so it really explains like how all that works. We decide on our lessons and we pick at our names, and that kind of thing. So yes, that ties into the second reason is that there's some sort of karmic lesson, right? And that also ties into, well, if I'm supposed to learn this thing, but if I go do this thing, then how can I learn not to do it anymore? And karma will come back and give you that kind of lesson. Then the third one is that there is a lesson, and I list 100 different lessons that it could be. The fourth one is that there's a test to see if you learn the lesson. And then the fifth one is that there's a blessing in disguise, right? There's some sort of like, darn it, I missed that light or I missed that plane. Oh, that plane crashed, right? So you can see something as you think it's bad, but then it ends up taking you down a more positive path. And then there's overlying all of them is the big reason why, which is to get you to change something, right? The whole purpose is to get you down a new road.
The consensus does seem to be that we come here to learn a lesson. Sometimes they're not fun. Sometimes they're downright horrible. But unless we do that, we're not going to progress and get closer to being a light being and getting farther away from being a dense being. That's probably the easiest way to explain it, which is consistent with just about every single other speaker that have had direct experience in that in-between space, which I think could tell us a lot about why things happen and why bad things happen.
Do you know what you do in between? Do you know what your job is?
I can't remember it. All I can tell you is what I've been told for the past 4 years, and I've heard lots of different things, but I'm sure you've got something to tell us about that.
Yeah, well, of course, I love Michael Newton's books, which I'm sure you probably are familiar with, right? And he does talk about different jobs, and some people are up there painting sunsets, right? There's somebody in charge of the lottery, right? That's up there trying to make sure the right person wins the lottery. There are people creating new versions of flowers. For me, I'm part of a team that creates planets.
You're part of a team that creates planets, so you are still in touch with some of these beings.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That we need to hear about.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing because I'll tell you 2 stories related to that. One of them was I've known about it for many years, but I didn't tell anybody. Just never said that to a soul because I thought it would freak people out. Except for you, I knew it wouldn't freak you out. Then all of a sudden, this guy I meet and he comes up to me and goes, "You create planets on the other side, don't you?" And I'm like, "Okay." And this is confirmation out of the blue. This person knew this.
Who was that?
It was just a friend of mine, but he just all of a sudden just said that. And then fast forward to quite a few years after that, I'm kind of in a meditative place working with my team because one of the reasons I'm here is to see what's going on this planet and see how I can contribute to its improvement. And like you said, to elevate.
Can you make sure the right person wins the next election?
The truth is I am working on that, but that's a whole nother thing.
I said that in jest, but hey, I had to ask.
I've made some predictions that have been pretty interesting. And the most recent one that I made a few years ago is really interesting. So we'll see how that manifests. But I don't want to go down that road. I know you probably don't want to talk politics.
We'll wait until the tape stops.
Yeah, it's very interesting what's happening. But anyway, I was in a meditative place working with the team because we were talking about if Earth doesn't progress or doesn't heal is a better way to say it, then where are these Earth energies going? Because some people, I believe, started out on Earth, right? They started up as amoebas probably and graduated up the chain, whereas some of us come from other places and we've graduated somewhere else and then we come here and we're here for a different kind of purpose. So I think there's kind of a mixture of people. But some of those earth energies may have consciousness because the body has its own consciousness. That's a key element to my first book. And so you've got to understand the level of that consciousness. And so we were talking about, well, where do we take this energy, this consciousness of some of these beings and put them? So we were working on an alternative to Earth to create another planet. I put in an order. I said, can we have one with more colors? Which is exactly to the point you were making earlier, right? That there are frequency of colors that humans can't see, but birds, we know, have 4 cones in their eyes, so they can see colors that we can't. Animals can see an energy that we can't. I have a funny meme where a cat, so 2 ghosts are making love and the cat's freaking out. It's my favorite meme.
That's what I meant to describe really. The frequency spectrum is quite wide, but as humans, we can only see a very small sliver of it. Many speakers have talked about what you're talking about is we're trying to actually normalize these things.
Yeah.
Kind of like an audio engineer takes all kinds of different recordings and use limiters and EQ and adjust things and take the noise out of it.
And it's also kind of like the concept of inattentional blindness. You can't see it if you don't know it exists. You may have seen that video with the gorilla going with the basketball players. You don't see the gorilla until you hear there's a gorilla walking through the basketball players. So yes, you have to have some awareness. And first you might go, oh, and then you, well, wait a minute, maybe there's something to it. Anyway, to finish the story really quick, I put in this order to have more colors in this new world. And then the next day, a good friend of mine called me. I hadn't talked to her in forever. And she said, I had a dream about you last night. I said, yeah. And she said, you took me on a tour of the cosmos, but instead of being all dark, it was all bright color.
Wow. Talk about everything is connected. Jesus.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? That was really fun. It's like the message is getting out there. So that's kind of the purpose of my podcast of the stories is some people never believed in it at all, but then they might listen to a story and go, well, wait a minute, this is possible. I had a friend of mine who is diehard atheist, but she loved reading my stories, but diehard atheist. And she got a terminal illness. She ended up passing away last February. But I told her when she first got the illness, I said, now when you go, you're going to have to come back and tell me I was right. And her granddaughter, right, literally like, right before her last breath, she said, Brownell said to remind you to come see her. And she did. And her friends didn't believe in it. They didn't know any of that was possible. But when I said, yes, she's here, I've seen her in this bird, it opens people's minds. And they were like, wow, I really do want to believe that she's with her husband who had passed away and my husband who just died. You know, it gives people hope and it gives people more promise.
It does.
In the future. And that's what really makes it really fun.
It definitely does give people hope. And that's one of the main reasons that I think a lot of us are trying to do this, trying to have a forum for people to tell their stories and share their experiences. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about was the We Meet Again is a trilogy about a famous couple that reincarnated to fulfill a prophecy that will change the world. What's a good soundbite about that for our listeners, which would kind of encourage them to go check that out?
It starts with a modern day couple. His first words to her when they meet is, we meet again. And then they're both kind of like, why? We've never met. And so they start having flashbacks to a previous lifetime in the 1930s in Brazil, and they're protecting an artifact from nefarious sources. And so all of a sudden, these nefarious sources are still looking for that artifact today because that artifact ties to a prophecy that goes back thousands of years. And so it's really fun because I'm launching the trilogy at once, so you don't have to wait, a year for the next one. Second one goes back to a lifetime in the 1500s, and my characters get to meet Shakespeare and Giordano Bruno, a big hero, big believer in reincarnation, also believed the universe was infinite and the earth went around the sun and he was burned at the stake for that. But they get to meet John Dee and some of these people, and it goes back even further, and they're trying to basically prove something from their previous lifetime. Since we already did it, I'm going to totally spoil part of it, which is the famous couple is Dante and Beatrice. He wrote the Divine Comedy, which is Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. And so this is tying to a mystery that goes to this secret society where they're here to prove something very profound that'll change the world. And of course, a lot of people don't want the world to change. So there are people against that.
It sounds like you are definitely on a mission. Being a fan of Dr. Michael Newton, once you read those books, kind of hard not to be. What are some of your most vivid memories or experiences of the in-between space? You mentioned something before about we actually have jobs at that point. I might be a guitar luthier, or I might be building amps or something like that.
On that world, you could be like Pythagoras and the humming of the spheres, right? Do you know all the Pythagorean history of the music of the planets, energy and music all throughout the cosmos? So you could go really big.
That would be amazing. And thanks, because I'm going to ask for that when my time comes.
We might hang out too. Well, you're a planet. Come on, let's talk about the harmony of that planet with the planets near it.
As long as one of us has passes to go see Prince and John Lennon and Kurt Cobain, I'll even play bass for them if they want.
There's got to be a good jam up there.
I would think so. What are some of the memories? Because people have been talking about reincarnation for ages, but the life in between lives space might be one of the things that explains what really happens when we die. Why do we make the choices we have? Why do bad things happen to good people? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Can you indulge me a minute and a half to recite my children's book because it explains it?
Yep.
Sometimes I wonder if this isn't home, and I don't mean Paris or London or Rome. I'm talking about another other place, before this time and outside this space. A place where we come from and will go to again. A world so mysterious, it makes my head spin. This world is all magic with a glow that's so bright. When I close my eyes, I still feel the light. Some call it heaven, some paradise. To me, it's a party where everyone's nice. We have friends who will meet us with warm open hands and music to greet us like grand marching bands. It's the place where we plan who we'll be with and when. We pick out our names like Sarah or Ben. Or Williams, Rodriguez, Ivana, or Chen, whoever we choose will feel like our kin. We decide on our lessons, the paths we will take, awards we might go for, and mistakes we might make. For life isn't easy and not always fun, but easy is boring like games always won. So we set up our challenges and mountains so high to test our endurance and reach the sky. It doesn't much matter if we get to the top. What matters much more is what we do when we stop. So I'll leave it there. There's more, but you can kind of get the idea. We do have things we do there, and I think there's different reasons we reincarnate. Some come to learn lessons. Some come to just hang out with their friends. Some come because they have a mission that they want to do on this planet. There's lots of different purposes. You asked about an experience, and I actually went through a meditation about a month ago that got into the other side and how this planet creating it was one of the most fun visions I've ever had, because my team was like an amusement park working on rides, putting everything together so you can come here and take all these rides. But we were creating this world of this, and I just love the kind of the analogy of it's an amusement park, because we do tend to take ourselves too seriously, and we also need to have fun while we're here. There are different planets. Each of them have different lessons. So I will work with my team and we'll sit there and figure it out. And we'll figure out what's the model of a planet. Can you procreate? If so, is there unlimited resources or do you have to compete for that? Can you live forever? All these dynamics that you make when you're doing the planet. So it's really fun.
Can you create a planet where there's nothing but really beautiful supermodels and rivers of weapons grade IPA and Cabernet Sauvignon and the best bands you can see living or not living?
Yeah, it's a vacation spot. Yeah, you can manifest that for sure.
I think I've heard that sometimes when we reincarnate, that one incarnation might be just like a vacation life.
Yeah.
Just because you need it. In other words, I can get together with some of my buddies and say, let's go back to Earth like in 2050. We actually can plan to come back into the world at that point.
Absolutely. You could decide, like you said, it can be a vacation time, or it can be I want to hang with my friends, or maybe you're doing that and creating incredible music. For example, you want to create a band and you can be making a difference in that regard. I don't think you have to always have a heavy lifetime. I think some of us sign up for harder lessons just to kind of graduate quicker, if you will. We call it AP courses or whatever.
If you call that an elective?
What am I doing? Taking AP. I want to take an easy class. I want to take PE my whole life.
Exactly. Or just band.
Or band or chorus.
You mentioned something about dreams earlier, and I've not gotten a consistent answer on this yet, but when someone dreams about places and things and people that are really familiar, but they've never physically been there, is that a past life? Is that a future life? What exactly is that?
I actually talk about that in my Reasons Why book. I mean, I think that there definitely can be past life memories. I call them a dreamery. It can also be some way your subconscious talks to you. Like I use a dream analysis book, and I'll sit there and go, okay, I'll dream, and I'll have no idea what a purple river means while I'm dreaming about a purple river. And then I look up my book, and it's like, oh, it means this thing is going to happen, or it means you need to do this this next thing. So sometimes I think we just have symbols from our subconscious or our superconscious that would come to us through dreams. Sometimes it might just be electrical impulses. We've just had all these things going on through the day and they just pop, just reminders of things. So I think a lot of times, I think when you see people, it can be a visitation from somebody from the other side as well.
That happens too. When you see people that are immediately familiar, but I've never met that woman before, or I've never been to that place, but it felt very familiar. Do you have any idea what that is?
I've definitely had past life dreams, for sure. I also think sometimes it's just a message. Sometimes it's a reflection of who you are in your subconscious. So I think there's a lot of different answers to that depending on what the person's going through. But can you get a glimpse of somebody you're supposed to meet so you can recognize them? Yeah, I think before we're even born, we might set up a reminder triggers, right? That this person's going to smell this way, or we're going to see them in our dreams, or they're going to have a gesture or an expression. And you go, oh, now that's how I'm supposed to remember you. So I think that can happen a lot too.
That can happen too. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So anything else that we need to know about, at least for today?
We didn't get too much into my story at the end. I want people to read that because I've had a couple of people actually tell me it could be a college course. And it's just 9,000 word story. It's free for anybody who wants it at any time. It's from the perspective of the upstairs. And when you start realizing that, it's been a really powerful year for me to go, okay, I've got to surrender and let them tell me what they want. And that's not been an easy thing for me. And that's not been my normal life. When I do what they want, they reward me with this joy that is just amazing. So I'd love people to read that too, because it's free. And I think it's really connecting with people on a lot of levels.
And it's also the title of a Doors song, The End.
Yeah, I know. I know that song.
Brownell, thanks so much for joining us today. Very, very cool information. In the meantime, how can our listeners find you online?
Well, I'm the only Brownell Landrum in the world. So it's pretty easy to find my brownelllandrum.com website, me at Brownell Landrum on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, BROWNELLLANDRUM. That's me.
You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. In the meantime, you can find more info on closertovenus.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.